What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Happy reset day to all of y'all. GM's getting a little bit closer in this season, so I wanted to cover one of my go-to builds that I will be using for my Void Titan here. That is a crazy support dealing with all of our variations of champions, barrier, unstoppable, and overload, as well as easily dealing with any shield type you can think of inside of that solar arc void. And we have a couple different variations of weapons that we will be using, so hopefully y'all like this build and can take it into those GMs to keep you and your fellow allies alive and really play that support character and that tank a Titan is supposed to be. So starting off right here, we're going to be using our Sentinel Shield because of our exotic in Ursa Furiosa, using that block tactic to help create orbs of power for our fellow Guardians, as well as taking a bunch of that damage inside of that endgame activity. And if you do need to, it has the potential to attack and get yourself out of a sticky situation if you end up being the last Guardian alive. Now for abilities over here, totally up to you for your barricade as well as your movement, your jump, so it's just a personal preference. Now for our melee over here, I think for me most of the time I'm going to be using my shield bash, which gives us that suppression on targets, as well as final blows grant us an overshield. Now depending on the mission in Grandmasters, might throw on this shield throw just because of some of our aspects and fragments that give us health regen on melee defeats. Might use this for that little bit farther access, depending, like I said, on the GM. If stuff's shooting at you far away, might throw on this, but if everything's up close and personal, thrall, stuff like that, definitely going to be using shield bash. Now for our grenade, I'm running Vortex because our Void Grenade is going to deal with our Overload champions. Now this just seems like the best chance with AoE and longevity for grenades to work with that mod stunning those Overload champions. Now you can throw on Void Wall, which does last a long time as well and have a slight reduced base cooldown, but in general, like I said, I think that the Vortex has the best chance of keeping that champion inside of the area to have that overload happen. Now moving on to our aspects, we're gonna first off have offensive bulwark. So when we have an overshield or inside ward of dawn, which we aren't gonna have with the Sentinel Shield build, but it recharges our grenade significantly faster, and we have increased melee range and damage. Melee final blows extend that overshield. So this is why having that extra little bit of range and damage with both, even shield bash and shield throw with an overshield, is going to be kind of nice to get that to perpetually go on. And we're gonna get overshield and grenades back really fast with this build because we're using Bastion as well. So casting our super grants an overshield to allies, and when we throw down our barricade, it grants an overshield to us and allies. So it's a very good way to, one, stay alive, plus just throwing down our shield with 100 recovery, we get that back super fast, and it easily procs offensive bulwark for us, giving us our grenade back super fast, which is important for this build because of our fragments. Now first off, we're using that Echo of Undermining so those grenades weaken targets. This is minus 20 to discipline, but it feels so good in that endgame activities in Master Strikes right now. It will feel great in GMs because you're able to have that nice damage increase on those champions and bosses because of weaken. So it's a very important part of this build, pairing well with Bastion and offensive bulwark as well. Next off, we're going to be using Echo of Starvation. This could be traded out for something else inside, depending what you are running. I personally like this to grant ourselves Devour when we create orbs of power, as well as our fellow teammates and allies are usually creating orbs of power as well, whether it be their super or whatever. So very good to have this on to keep us alive and keep that health regen going. Last but not least, Echo of Leeching. Like I said, those melee final blows start health regen for us and nearby allies, so this is good for keeping us and our allies alive, just playing into that support build of this Titan right here. Now for weapons, we're going to have a couple different options for most of these, but I am going to stick majority of the time with Revision 0 because of its anti-barrier intrinsic perks, plus it's not going to overload us on ammo capacity like using Arbalist mixed with a grenade launcher. Arbalist is great in S tier, don't get me wrong, but having this on, especially with the future catalyst that we're going to be able to unlock, Vorpal Weapon, I think that this thing is going to be an S tier weapon as well in endgame activities for PvE, so I'm definitely throwing this on for our anti-barriers. Now for our grenade launchers, for me, I'm running with Forbearance most of the time for those arc shields, chain reaction, and ambitious assassin. This thing is a menace for ad clear and does wonders in endgame content. Now we're going to be using this for unstoppable champions as well, and if you really need to switch it up, because we do have Void for our super, and I'm going to be running Cataclysmic 99% of the time as my heavy, so we have Void and Solar covered super easily with those burns, but we do have other options in wave frames, which I do love, in explosive personality right here with auto loading and frenzy, dealing with those solar shields just in case we don't have arc, and then deafening whisper right here with ambitious assassin. I wish I was able to get a better roll that wasn't snapshot, but this another wave frame with that rolling void, very good for those void shields if you have to go in and deal with more void than solar. This is just your two other options, but I'm going to be running Forbearance 90% of the time if I can, depending on those shields. Now, first off, for our mods, we're going to be using that grenade launcher Findo, so we can always have that in our unstoppable, and just in general for ad clear with that forbearance, we need that ammunition as well as firepower. So while we're charged with light, when we throw our grenade, we're going to get back a nice portion of that. So that just comes into play with dealing with our overload champions, as well as just weakening everything in the site by getting our offensive bulwark to proc with that overshield and getting our grenades back super fast. Now moving on to our Ursa Furiosa exotic gauntlets right here, which we're using to play that support role and tank all of that damage. Now for me, nothing too crazy in our mods, just using that unstoppable grenade launcher, which is 7 energy, seems kind of excessive to me. Maybe if it was specifically for heavy, but still that is a lot of energy, so we can't really build it out too much. Not that I needed anything extra in these other slots, but we're using that exotic armor perk, so we move faster while guarding in Sentinel Shield, and when we guard that damage, it converts it back into super energy for us when the super ends, just allowing us to play that tank and support more often by getting our super back really fast. Even though we only have a 42 on the intellect, between that and 100 is only a minute difference, and with the amount of damage we can do and ad clear, we get our super back fast anyways. Next, moving on to our chest piece, we're going to be using sniper damage resistance and concussive dampener. You could switch out the sniper to something like melee damage resistance, once again depending on which GM or endgame you are going into, and then we're using another firepower, which we also have on our helmet, to give us that grenade back faster when we fully expend that energy. So stacking both of those together just gives us quite a bit more than just one of them. Now moving on to our legs right here, we're going to be using Absolution on both of those, so we reduce all of our ability cooldowns when we pick up Orbs of Power, so that it counts for our Overshield, which procs us our offensive bulwark, as well as our grenade, which weakens, and our melee. When we have that Overshield, that gives us some nice health regen and that extra little bit of damage. So having both of these on gives us back a nice bit of energy for all 3 of those when we pick up Orbs of Power. And last but not least, on this build, we're going to be using a decent amount of seasonal mods, which we can always change later. But right here, Lord Kelvin's Basilisk, so those Void and Stasis grenades disrupt overload champions. That is why we're playing so heavily into the grenade build and getting those back fast, plus that weaken. Now we're also using Advanced Scout, so champions that we stun, since this is a support build and we have the option to stun all 3 variations of champions. When we do stun them, takes additional damage from those teammates, so playing into that support role, like I said once again. And we also are becoming charged with light whenever we stun or a member of our fire team stuns a champion, and you know in those GM activities we have champions everywhere, so easily getting that charge with light, which allows us to use both of our fire powers on our other armor pieces. So this build, like I said, super crazy for that support, taking it into a lot of endgame master content right now, which is super easy when you're going in there with a fire team of 3, especially with this build. Don't have to worry about any of those champions. Your other teammates can play specifically to DPS, creating orbs of power, whatever it may be, because this build really does it all with keeping us alive, giving us a good amount of protection, as well as dealing with a bunch of adds and stunning all of those champions inside of all of our endgame activities. So hopefully y'all have a nice variation of those Ursa Furiosas and can get them procced and just play that tank, that Titan, how it's supposed to be, taking all that DPS from our enemies, as well as helping out with weaken, stunning. Ooh, it is just my go-to right now for that endgame activity. So thank you guys so much for watching. Truly appreciate that support. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.